Iran strikes back. We've been talking ever since last night when all this attack from Israel into Iran started last night. We've been talking about that. We've been waiting for the expected Iranian response, and the first part of it, at least, is now materializing as we speak. These are just images from just moments ago where Iranian missiles were coming down, and just like with Professor Ted Postel, who came on our show last year to talk about this, who told you beforehand this would happen, that the Iron Dome hit a few things, but nearly everything has been, both the videos that Gary's going to be showing you here, you're going to see they're just rolling right through and hitting whatever they want to hit. It's incredible, some of this stuff here. So now then you're seeing the reality of it. So the point being that Iran has the ability to hit some serious targets inside Israel. At this point, we don't know what's been hit. We don't know how much damage, casualties, any of that stuff. We're playing a lot of this by ear. A lot of this stuff is genuinely happening as we're on the air here. Now, this was supposed to be something focused on a different aspect of this whole situation. And so we have a guest on, Harry Kaz. You've seen him before. He's the editor-in-chief of National Security Journal. Well, I guess it's not in Washington, D.C. I guess it's just online. But anyway, it's a really great place. It's got a lot of great content, as the name implies here. And we still are going to talk about the things we'd planned with the international reaction, what the Arab states in the region are thinking, what some of the European states are thinking, et cetera. But we've got this breaking news. So we're just going to camp on that for a minute. And by the way, just let me point out, you're going to be seeing a lot more of Harry Kaz. And we intended to really announce this under different circumstances, but when missiles are falling all over the place, you got to go with what's happening. But I'll still pause for a second and tell you that the Daniel Davis Deep Dive has been wanting to expand our coverage for a while, and we wanted to especially do more on the Indo-Pacific, China, Taiwan, the South China Seas, North Korea, etc., and even some domestic political issues, whatever, but we just don't have the bandwidth. Believe me, you don't know how much time Gary and I put into making every show we have here, and there just isn't time to do those things. But we think it's important to cover for our audience and give more people more opportunity to see what's going on. So Harry Kaz has been very kind to accept our invitation to join the team, and he's going to be doing some shows under the Daniel Davis Deep Dive banner, but that are focused more on these other areas, so Gary and I can continue to focus on the primary areas here. So Daniel Davis Deep Dive is escalating and advancing so that you're going to get more stuff. And so Harry is on with us today as my guest. I'm going to be his guest on Monday when he's going to take his inaugural dip into this, and he'll have his own executive, or not executive, but a producer, Charbel, who probably is watching right now. He'll be running the controls for Harry starting next week, and we'll see how that's going to go there too. So first of all, Harry, just welcome to the show. And I wonder if you can tell people a little bit about you who may not have seen you from your previous advanced appearances.
Yeah, Daniel. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for having faith in me in doing this. You might not remember this, but I was your very first guest on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive way back, I think in either October, November,
September. I think it was.
Yeah.
I did forget that. Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me.
It's funny. I was going back looking at sort of old clips and what we had talked about in the past. And I was like, whoa, I was his first guest. Imagine that. So anyway, it's great to be here. It's a true honor. Me and my wife watch Daniel Davis Deep Dive pretty much every night, or we fall asleep listening to your podcast. So
wait, I'm not sure that's good. You fall asleep.
Come on. It's fine. It's fine. We always find something like really good to sort of like focus our minds on before we go to bed. And we'll always end up going back to international affairs, and it always ends up being your podcast because your guests are great. The content's solid. And one of the reasons I really wanted to join the channel is because you're talking about things and ideas and focus areas that the mainstream media is just not covering. So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to join. If I could, Danny, just 30 seconds about me and who I am. I live in Orlando, Florida. I used to live in Washington, D.C. My wife and I ran back in 2023 out of there. Maybe someday we can talk about that. Not really a big fan of think tanks or the deep state. My views have changed a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, really since the COVID pandemic. I'm a big believer in foreign policy realism and pragmatism. I align a lot with Danny's ideas, with some differences here and there, and I'm sure we'll touch on those. And Danny and I will have some fun debates. We used to have those in the past on Facebook, so we'll probably bring back some of that. But great time, Danny, to join the team, considering we've got, we're on the verge of World War III in the Middle East. So
yeah, and it's a good transition back to the real world here. Yeah, one of the things I really like, and Harry and I used to do the Facebook Lives. This is, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember exactly when we did some of those, but they were always really good. We are mostly aligned, but sometimes we find areas where we don't completely agree so that we can take different perspectives. And I actually look forward to doing that. But I'm really looking forward to you expanding the canvas here and covering more issues so that our audience has access to more information, than the ones we've had here so far. So I'm excited about that. But as you point out, this is a big one here right now that's going on. And so, Gary's been showing these really dramatic shots here. And I think there was a couple of others where there's been some damage inside buildings inside of Israel. Gary, if you could play that second one, the other one that you have that shows a guy on the balcony. This one's really pretty amazing. This is somebody on their balcony overlooking, I don't know if that's Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. I think it's Tel Aviv. This is absolutely incredible, Harry. Just look at this. Now, this is a lot of Iron Dome stuff, and you see there are some interceptions on these, but then you see like that one there, nothing. And bam, that one hits right next to it. And by the way, that on that second impact, I think this is going to loop through in a second. You're going to see what appears to be an attack against the launch site itself, against the air defense missile battery. And it looks like when that second big missile hits, and you'll see it replay again here, then you're going to see what appears to be a cook-off, meaning that it probably hit the battery, and one of the missiles that may have already been in the launcher just went off at an erratic pace. So you're going to see the one hit here, and now bam, that second one, and then right away there's this cook-off that's kind of going in a weird direction, like it's not going anywhere. So I think the battery was probably hit right there. This is just some incredible footage right here. And this is, a modern city that have this. Of course, this looks just like the Tehran images that came from the previous night. So, Harry, let me just ask, right off the top, what does all this mean? Where in the world is this going?
I mean, it isn't hyperbole, Danny, to say that we aren't on the edge of some sort of either big regional conflict or, a third world war. I mean, it's not out of the question. I think the Iranians, from the last strikes they conducted on Israel, have learned. There's a lot of problems with their guidance systems and, making sure that the missiles land accurately. A lot of them had problems where they weren't able to get off the ground from different sources I've heard. So my opinion is that the Iranians went back and said, look, a lot of these missile systems failed. They weren't as good as advertised. And I'm sure the Iranians went to their friends in North Korea, who, by the way, I'm sure have gotten a massive tech upgrade from the Russians,
100%.
Who are getting a lot of help for their the Ukraine efforts.
I read a report just yesterday that the Wasang 11 North Korean missile got a dramatic upgrade from Russian scientists, and now that one is even being exported to Russia. One can imagine some also went to Israel, to Iran.
Right, because a lot of the Iranian missile program is based on North Korean technology. Actually, some of the different missiles that were pulled off the ground had North Korean tech, like literally Korean boards and things like that they found in the systems. So it isn't a shocker to me. One comment I want to make about the actual missiles that are coming down on Israel, Danny, I'm not shocked about the amount of ordnance that is hitting the ground. There's a couple different reasons for that. Now, some are going to say that Iron Dome, missed a lot of strikes, that, the other different systems the Israelis have, like the Patriots, the THAADs, other platforms, they're not hitting the mark. We have to remember, these interceptors are extremely expensive, and you just can't go to Walmart and go buy more. I mean, it takes months and years of planning to get more of them onto the ground in Israel. So the Israelis have to hold some of this stuff back. They can't go after every missile. And keep in mind on this, Danny, as I'm sure you know, you have to throw at least 2 interceptors for every missile or rocket that's coming down to make sure that you get a contact. So you could blow through your interceptors very, very quickly. And considering how expensive they are, the timelines it takes to get them, the Israelis have to hold some. So they know they're going to take damage. And we also have to factor in that the Iranians have thousands of ballistic missiles. Now, the Iranians also have
thousands of drones, actually.
Right, drones too. So the both sides sort of have to calibrate their attack approach here. You know, the Iranians don't want to blow through all their missiles that fast, and then the Israelis don't want to blow through their interceptors that fast. So this is sort of a math war too, as well as a missile and drone war, and it's crazy.
Now, speaking of the math and the supply, I mean, Israel has not been able to maintain its fight in Gaza, its fights in Lebanon, its attacks into the Houthis, etc., unless they've been supported by us. They have bragged on some of the Israeli media, and Trump has bragged back that a lot of these bombs and missiles and stuff that were used against Iran were because we provided them. So now that you've opened another front on the war for Israel on something, I don't have any idea if they even have a conflict resolution strategy or an outcome. But now that they're going to be having to use ordnance all over the place, who's going to provide that ordnance, and do we have it?
No, we don't, Danny. I mean, look, the United States isn't in a wartime footing here. I mean, we spent what, 250 billion, you know, giving to Ukraine to arm them up as much as we possibly could, and that was a complete failure. You know, I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But look, the United States does not have the capability to fund wars all over the world. A lot of those arms subsidized by U.S. taxpayers, me and you, by the way, and we just don't have the factory or industrial capacity to do all of this. I mean, look, the Israeli military at brass tacks, especially the Israeli Air Force, is really a U.S. Air Force on steroids. For example, they have platforms like the F-16I, the F-15I, the F-35 Ayadur. These are custom-built American fighters that are literally built to strike targets in Iran, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas, whoever. But the Israelis can't fight what is a 7-front war at this point. I can't even keep track of how many places the Israelis are fighting. Any nation is going to go through war fatigue at some point. They're going to run out of arms, missiles, bombs, drones to fight with. So I think the Israelis, what I'm concerned about here, Danny, is I think this is about, you know, taking out their nuclear program to try to ensure that they don't have a nuclear weapon. We can talk more about that, but this feels more like a regime change operation. You don't try to kill all their generals, all their scientists, their leadership. You know, you would have a much different target set if you were just going after the nuclear program. And you don't want to get into a situation where you don't have anybody to talk to and actually end the conflict. So there's a bigger problem set going on here, and it leads to some very disturbing conclusions.
And you know, you talk about the negotiating track and then who was assassinated. It wasn't just the IRGC leaders, and there's quite a few of them. It wasn't just a scientist. It was also reported one of the senior political figures that was also very instrumental in negotiating with the United States was also killed. What signal does that send that one of the negotiators, at least from what's been reported, was also on the assassination list when we've been allegedly trying to negotiate an outcome with Iran?
Danny, what it means is we don't want to negotiate with you. We want to kill you. We want to end your regime. We want to make sure your regime does not exist. And, you know, the wider point that I would make about all this is to bring it back to U.S. domestic politics, to bring it to our national interests. We Americans didn't vote for this. Americans have spoken, I think, with almost one voice. We do not want regime change anymore. We don't want these wars. And if this is what Israel wants to do, I think a lot of people in MAGA and a lot of progressive Democrats too, a lot of peace-loving Democrats, you know, that peace-loving left that we all remember, that allied with Republicans on a lot of issues actually recently, I think have been very clear. If this is what Israel wants to do, that's your choice. That's your war of choice. It's not our war. And I think, you know, to maybe jump a little bit further here, Danny, where this starts to get a little scary is the Iranians now are in a very difficult position. I mean, their generals are getting killed, their nuclear program's getting attacked, their long-range missiles are being attacked, their air defense was destroyed a couple of months ago. The Iranians are probably saying to themselves, what do I do? I mean, I still have a domestic political, circus to sort of deal with. Do I attack the United States back? Do I incur Donald Trump's wrath? I mean, this whole thing has been blown out of control when it never had to happen. The Israelis should have allowed diplomacy to continue for at least a few more months to see if a deal could have been struck that everybody could have lived with.
Well,
I think,
that implies that they actually would have accepted that outcome. I think that they've been fighting against that outcome, so they don't want to wait anymore.
And now they've got bombs coming down their cities and innocent civilians dying. It's terrible. And it didn't have to happen. It just did not.
Absolutely did not.
No,
completely avoidable.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, the question is, how much further is this going to go? Because the next question I want to ask you, okay, now bombs are falling on Tel Aviv. What is it Netanyahu going to do now? He certainly isn't going to say, okay, well, we hit them, they hit us. All right, we're even Steven now. What is Israel likely to do next?
Oh, Danny, I think this is going to go on for years in a very protracted state. There might be a situation where different parties come in, whether it's Donald Trump, the Europeans, who knows, the Russians. I mean, there's a wider global interest to see this thing ratcheted down. But if you're sitting in Tehran, what are you thinking? Are you thinking, I don't want a nuclear weapon anymore? Hell no, I want a nuclear weapon right now. You learn from history. You understand that the countries who don't get regime change are the countries that have nukes. Is anybody talking about regime changing North Korea? No, there's no way, because they've got at least 40 or 50 nuclear weapons, and they've probably got at least 20 ICBMs that can touch the United States and kill millions of people. Iran now, I think, is going to try to sprint to a nuclear weapon. So what's going to happen here, Danny, is very simple. Every few years, the Israelis are going to do the old mow the lawn approach. They're going to strike Iran once they see those capabilities coming back up. Iran's going to fire back, and we're going to have this situation, at least I hope not, where both sides keep attacking each other over years, and this just keeps going on and on. I think that's the most likely scenario where this goes, or God forbid something terrible happens. We end up in a larger regional conflict where the United States gets sucked in, and I think that's where it gets more dangerous.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why Secretary of State Rubio put out that statement right away last night. We didn't have anything to do with this, and don't shoot our guys because we're in the Middle East, or we had nothing to do with it, etc. It's debatable whether we had nothing to do with it or not. That based on some of the Trump's comments, we seem to have had some involvement, but we didn't fight and we didn't shoot anything. And it's definitely not in the Iranian interest to, as you said a minute ago, provoke Trump where he would do something. But then again, those are some pretty vulnerable targets.
It's tempting. I mean, it's for both sides are going to be attempted to attack, whether it's the Ayatollahs or Trump. I mean, for the Ayatollahs, I mean, look, they have their own masters in politicians and invested interests in Tehran they have to answer to, just like any political body. There's going to be a lot of pressure to strike back at the United States. Even if they do, even if it's a small target, I think you'll get enough people in the MAGA coalition, plus the neocons, that will put a lot of pressure on Trump to strike. I mean, there are already assets in the Middle East. I don't think those B-2 bombers that were all over satellite images in Diego Garcia have been moved. We know there are
right, and there was actually reports. I'll just break in. There was a couple more destroyers were sent to the region that were sent over. Starting, at least it was reported this morning. I'm not sure when it's going to arrive, but we already are getting more firepower sent to the region right now.
So that means we got destroyers, we got B-2s, we got B-52s with long-range attack weapons. We've got F-35s in the region.
To smell, by the way.
So A-10s. We've probably got Ohio-class SSGNs in the area that are armed with at least 150 Tomahawk cruise missiles. So there's a lot of ordnance we can put on Iran to do a lot of damage. And look, for Trump, it's probably tempting for him. You know what I mean? At brass tacks, he is not somebody who wants to go to war, but if he's pressed, if he feels like if Americans have been hurt, he will strike. He will. And I mean, I don't know what the Iranians do after that. Do they try to, for example, use their Russian-built Kilo class submarines and try to close off the Strait of Hormuz? Do we get $150 gallon of gas, a barrel of gasoline. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this whole thing can spiral out of control very quickly. I think if history teaches us anything, Danny, is that these type of situations, you want to try and do a full diplomatic press to wind them down as fast as you possibly can, but I don't know. There's a lot of bad blood on both sides at this point.
Well, there is, and let's actually widen the lens out a little bit and take a look at some of those other factors. And let's start with China and Russia related to their BRICS partner, Iran. So far, and I haven't seen since we've been on the air today. The last time I checked, I hadn't seen any other than just news from like the Chinese Global Times, their official newspaper, English language newspaper. I haven't seen any statements come out of China. Maybe you have. I also have only seen reporting from the Russian side. But what is your expectation of what they're going to do? Because it seems that both China and Russia would not want to see a regime drop and a loss by Iran, because they both have for oil and for weapons capabilities that Russia has. What do you think is going to happen with each of those?
I think both of them have very, very similar goals. I mean, for both China and Russia, I mean, for the Chinese first, short term, Danny, I don't think they want to see a wider conflict. That's bad for them. Obviously, they think, oil prices are going to go up. The prices of commodities will go up. They don't want to see a wider conflict in the Middle East. That is not in their interest. But long term, once the conflict is over, if assuming Iran is relatively stable, they still have billions of dollars in their bank accounts, and they're going to want to go shopping for the latest military hardware. Chinese will be open for business. They are selling brand new stealth fighters, the J-35. They have lots of different air defense systems that I'm sure the Iranians would love to get their hands on, that are offshoots of the S-300 and the S-400 air defense systems. They would love to arm up with the latest Chinese tech that they can get their hands on. So, that's something I don't think the Israelis thought about, is the aftermath. The Iranians are not going to, they're not going to get caught with their pants down again. That's for sure.
Yeah, they may want a regime change outcome, but they're not applying. They don't have the assets, the Israelis don't, to make it come about. I mean, even with the Hezbollah, when they assassinated Nasrallah, they did take out the leader there, and that was a quasi non-state actor, whatever. That's one thing, but the country of Iran is a different thing. They have, number one, they have a bigger government. It's not just a one guy. And if they did, I'm sure he would end up being replaced. But then if they can't accomplish that, and they're kind of semi-trying, what's the outcome? What's the objective for Israel?
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, Danny. It's chaos. I mean, look, if I put myself in an Israeli leader's shoes, in Bibi Netanyahu's shoes, I can understand why they would want to try to take out Iran's nuclear program. On a very basic human level, I get that. Okay, I think we all do. But we need to come to a realization here that, and we've talked about this, nuclear weapons are 80 years old. They are old technology. And I think on a much bigger international affairs level, the United States and a lot of other countries need to come to some sort of grand conclusion about what we're going to do when perhaps many other countries around the world are going to start getting nuclear weapons. Many countries that don't share our interests. Are we going to try to launch regime change wars against all these different countries? I mean, does that make sense? I mean, it seems like a nice way to bankrupt humanity and literally start a nuclear war. So I think for the Israelis, I think, and their hearts, I know a lot of people are going to give me flack for saying this, there's good intentions to end that program. But at the same time, when you weigh out those pros and cons, the cons completely outweigh any pros of doing this. And look, countries around the world know how to do nuclear deterrence. If the Iranians, God forbid, got a nuclear weapon, Danny, Israel knows how to deal with it. The United States knows how to deal with it. And it's very simple. Iran, if you use a nuclear weapon, your country is going to be destroyed. That is nuclear deterrence in a nutshell. You don't need to go to Princeton and get a PhD to understand that. So and that's a terrible way to live.
And listen, do you have the world we're in? Just look at Iran and Pakistan. They hate each other, but that nuclear weapons has prevented probably another war from kicking off just a couple of weeks ago, because of the certainty that they can't escalate conventionally very far, because they both have nukes over their shoulder. Right now, only Israel has nukes over its shoulder. And I guess they don't want to have to be restrained. I don't know. But if the Iranian side gets it, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the end of Israel. It means that it's going to be the end of unilateralism by Israel,
And,
but it
and
could be stability.
And you know what, Danny, and I think the wider point is this: go a little deeper. Why do people not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Well, it's actually simple. The regime is basically locked down and protected. I mean, it's the ultimate military shield. Again, this is why nobody tries to regime change North Korea or Pakistan or other countries that we don't like. It's because the U.S. military power is negated by nuclear weapons, because even though the United States might dominate in the conventional space, maybe not anymore, but at least, in most instances, we still do. And when a country that's an adversary of ours has nuclear weapons, the battlefield situation's completely changed. I mean, the United States does not like to take military losses on the field. We're not Russia. So when a country gets those type of weapons, we're frozen. Naturally, we don't want to have a military conflict with those countries. And that's why I think Israel sort of rushed headlong into this, because the Iranians were close to that breakout capability. Whether they were ever going to go over the nuclear threshold anyway is a completely different story. Yeah, but I think that's why they did what they did.
Yeah. And I mean, and what I've been arguing for months, actually for years, is that their actions have been pushing Iran into the direction where that, I don't care how much you hated the JCPOA or hated Barack Obama, they were severely constrained and way far away from the breakout period, much farther than they were prior to this strike here. And like you said, I agree. I think that the likelihood is that this pushes them into a race to a bomb situation. We'll see if they have the capacity to do that with all the damage they've had. And I'm sure there's more strikes to come, especially now. But anyway, let's move on to one other thing. Let's stay in the diplomatic realm. Let's look at the other nations in the region, other Arab regimes. I've seen Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey in particular have all condemned Israel's initial attack or so. What is your view of take a survey of the regional governments, and what, if anything, does it mean?
So I tried to check in with some diplomatic friends out in Qatar, in Riyadh, and in some of the other major capitals throughout the Middle East. On background, they're sending some conflicting messages. I mean, on the one hand, you have the official press statements, Danny, that say, we condemn this action by Israel. It's an act of war. It's terrible. Everybody's using the word restraint. We want all parties to be restrained. We want them to come back to the diplomatic table and try to end this conflict. But some diplomats are a little braver on background from when they're in their conversations with me. A lot of them are saying, look, Harry, on the one hand, we don't want to see a war in the Middle East. We don't want to see innocent people die. But at the same time, if this stops Iran from getting a nuclear program and the costs are low, no war has low costs, but that's another story. They seem to be okay with it if the costs are low. That's my initial read from some of the diplomats that have been willing to at least just speak on background, not willing to give out country affiliations or anything like that. But a lot of them are hoping that maybe that this might be something that will push the Iranian nuclear program, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. But I mean, look, the challenge here, Danny, is that we have all these open wounds, all these open wars all around the world that are pushing countries like China, Iran, North Korea, Russia all together. And I think at different levels, these different countries are collaborating together on military technology. I mean, we've talked about, the situation between Russia and North Korea and how the Russians are helping the North Koreans, create better missiles and probably better nuclear weapons technology. I think what this ends up doing is the Iranians go out to try to get whatever pieces of nuclear tech they can get, missile technology from the North Koreans. I mean, keep in mind, the North Koreans now have solid fueled ICBMs, something I never would have dreamed just 5 or 6 years ago. I think the Russians definitely helped them with that. I think that's pretty clear. So if the Iranians have the money to do it, I think you're going to see the Iranians really sprint to have those intercontinental range ballistic missiles, maybe try to put them on submarines. That might be a stretch, but North Koreans are starting to do that type of stuff or getting close to it. So, I think diplomats they're saying the right things for the cameras, but on the other end, they're kind of hoping that the Iranian nuclear program gets pushed out a number of years. But it's a difficult situation for the entire region. That's for sure.
But that's interesting. One of the benefits of being a journalist that you have access to a lot of these people who will speak on background that often don't speak to me. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to have the information. I'm not sure I'm glad to hear the answer, but at least we understand the situation. Let's jump into a different group of countries. So in that Obama administration, the JCPOA, the joint, what was it, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Yeah.
The nuclear deal. Well, the big pressers behind that was Germany, France, and the UK were really helping along with that. Now, they have been for trying to get Iran back into this. They were not for President Trump in his first term getting out of it. And those countries also have been a little bit more willing here in just the last month or so, and certainly predating all this, to start taking Israel government and policies to task, especially for their conduct of the war in Gaza and this significant number of civilians that are being killed. What is your understanding of where they're coming down on this now attack into Iran?
So I have a little bit of inroads into the German diplomatic corps through some of my different works at the National Interest when I was editor there. And I can tell you, at least to give you the German perspective, which is the one I know the most, several different diplomats sort of expressed the same thing. And I'm going to paraphrase their comments from background. They feel like Israel is just giving them a giant diplomatic headache and really keeps them up at night, was what one diplomat told me in Berlin. Look, they're frustrated. They have a lot of the same concerns that actually the Chinese and the Russians and a lot of countries have. They don't want this to break out into a wider war. Again, they look at the price of commodities. They worry about the Strait of Hormuz getting blocked up. They worry about having massive oil prices. You know, they're already inflation in Europe is still stubborn, Danny. They still don't have a complete handle on it. They're worried that could be something that brings inflation back to 3, 4, 5%. So they're nervous about their economies at a time where, you know, they're being asked by the Trump administration to all of a sudden spend 5% of their GDP on defense spending, and they're already running massive deficits to begin with. So for them, they're nervous about the wider regional ramifications and global ramifications of all this, because their economies, to be honest, just aren't in a solid place where they need them to be. And there's no easy solutions from their perspective either on how to make those economies work a lot better. Their demographics are terrible. Their deficits are bad. They're just not in a good place vis-a-vis compared to the United States with all of our problems. So they're exasperated, to say the least.
And final question I want to see is we're going to look at how all of this fits together in the global situation. You mentioned at the outset, you know, you're concerned about the possibility for this spiral into events that historians would later look back and say was the beginning of World War III. Well, nothing is isolated in the international affairs, and this one certainly has some ramifications to the Russia-Ukraine war. For example, it was about 2 weeks ago, Volodymyr Zelensky was complaining in public, I think it was less than 2 weeks actually, where he was saying, hey, Lloyd Austin during the Biden administration promised us 20,000 interceptor missiles that we're going to use. You can use for anti-drone strikes, etc. But here recently, whatever was left of them, the Trump administration diverted to Israel. So Israel got them and we didn't get them. So that already, what apparently, whether it was planned or not is unknown. I've actually asked our guest on our previous show, and he said it could have been coincidence. We don't know. But what we do know is that it was diverted to Israel. Now then, with this opening of a new front here, and as you pointed out, I think it's like a 7-front war now, and some of them are quite active, that's going to require more ammunition and more weapons. And the U.S., I don't know that we were already reducing what we were sending to Ukraine right now. What is this going to do to American support for Ukraine, and how is that going to impact that war?
Danny, look, as powerful as the United States is, with a $27 trillion economy, 350 million people, a highly educated base, we can't do everything. And the country itself, if you really take a wider lens at where we are, you know, diplomatically, globally, economically, we're in trouble. And this is one of the reasons I actually wanted to come on and do and be a part of Deep Dive, is to talk about some of these issues, because we are at a country that is straining. We are trying to be not just the world's policemen, but state troopers, army, you name it. We're literally trying to do everything, and we're buckling under that strain. We do not have the capacity to fund a war in Ukraine, which it seems like most of our military aid has stopped now, which I think is great. You know, helping the Israelis, you know, fight all their different wars and regime change wars. And there's real world consequences to this. I want to give you a quick example I think a lot of people missed. Under the Biden administration, we had something called AUKUS, which is a deal with Australia, Great Britain, a few other allies, to help Australia build nuclear attack submarines and then help Canberra build their own nuclear attack submarines. Well, there's going to be a policy review because lo and behold, guess what, Danny? We can't build the submarines for them. Again, that's my read of the situation. What we're trying to do is actually build 2 Virginia-class attack submarines every year. There's been audits and different studies that show that we can only build 1.2 submarines per year. And as you know, you can't build 0.2 of anything. So that's obviously a huge problem. But the point is this, we can't do everything. We just can't. And what I would say, Danny, is this. Why aren't those munitions and weapons that we're sending to the Middle East, why aren't they coming back to the United States? I mean, God forbid, if there's a contingency with China right now, because we've taken so much military equipment out of our own stocks for the Ukraine war, how would we fight a war against China if we decide to do that, which I think is a horrible idea. And we're going to talk a lot about this on your channel, but we wouldn't be able to. We'd lose that war within 2 weeks, in my opinion, at least. So I think we need to think very carefully about the decisions we make. I think in the days and weeks ahead, when we talk about the situation between Israel and Iran, I think Donald Trump needs to put that peacemaker hat back on, because that's what the American people voted for him to be.
Yep.
And to try and get in and try to act as a true diplomat and solve this mess. I think what he needs to do right now, Danny, is send Marco Rubio to the region, not Steve Witkoff or one of his buddies, but send the real Secretary of State out there and literally go to Israel and tell Bibi Netanyahu, you got to stop. Because at some point, if you don't stop, the next thing that we're going to have to do is start considering about, all those wonderful F-35 Aders that you have, and you just put a new order for more of them. Maybe they don't happen.
And how would the administration ever stand up to the really powerful pro-Israeli component, especially in both the House and the Senate, and in the media sphere? There's so much support for that. They would probably just cry huge foul just to hear you say that. How would
I would say this? That is cracking, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the war in Gaza really turned a lot of people's perspectives when it comes to this blanket support of Israel. I mean, look. I support Israel. I support the Jewish state. I don't talk about this too much, but my grandfather was actually in the Holocaust. I'm not Jewish, Danny, or neither was he. We're Greek Americans. But long story short, with Greeks who helped American pilots that were downed in World War II, if they got caught helping them, a lot of them were put in Nazi concentration camps.
Oh wow!
So I have a deep respect for what Israel's, tragic history of what they've been through. But at the same time, what has happened over the last 2 years is, I think, has really had a lot of people challenge what some of the actions that the Israeli government has done. Not the Israeli people, but some of the actions that Bibi Netanyahu has taken. So I think that some of that support is cracking. If you go on social media and you see what sort of the people from MAGA are saying on X, they are not blanket supporting Israel anymore. And I think, look, the United States has strong support for Israel. And I think we will continue to do so. But at the same time, when any nation does things that are against our own national interest, put Americans in jeopardy, put our own economic vitality in jeopardy, that's a problem. That's a serious problem.
Couldn't agree with you anymore on that. Well, listen, I really appreciate this kind of one over the world to 30,000 foot level. That's one of the reasons we have this channel, and why I love it, is that, you're talking on the news on, whatever it is, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they're going to be telling you what's happening with missiles falling and stuff, but there's hardly ever any context put behind things. And that's one of the things we love to do here. And we're grateful to add you to the team and look forward to seeing how that plans out starting Monday. I can't remember. Do we have a time for your first show on Monday? Do we set that?
I think we said 10 a.m.
Yeah, I think it's 10 a.m. I think 10 a.m. on Monday. Most likely, watch our channel. We'll have this promoted, of course, before it comes out. But most likely, we'll be seeing that. And I'll be your first guest. You'll be actually running the show on that day, and I'll be your guest.
You're in trouble. You're in deep trouble, Danny.
I know. I'm really worried because you're not going to tell me what it's about. So
nope.
We'll see how it's going to work out. But really appreciate you guys. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done that. And thanks, Harry, for coming on today. And if there's any other breaking news, we'll come on over tonight. But at the moment, that's all we have for you today. And we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, whatever it is, because you deserve to make sense of the world around you. Thanks very much. And we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.